Hello world, hello Facebook, hello all those watching this on listenvisionlive.com. It's the Nitty Gritty Show. It's your boy Jay DeCosta.
It's your girl Katniss.
And together we are the Nitty Gritty.
It's Tim Wise. You're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
Everybody, this is Stevie Powell. You're now watching the Nitty Gritty Show. Check it out.
And so I'm DeCosta, and you need to watch the Nitty Gritty Show.
My name is Sherman Moss, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
That's the Grant Thompson, aka G. Ainsworth, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
I'm Anthony White, and this is the Nitty Gritty Show.
Yeah. Bam, it's Jay Thompson. You're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
You are watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
My name is Jay Grant Thompson, and guess what? You're in tune to the Nitty Gritty Show.
I'm Will Jawando, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
And my name is Mitch Holmes, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
My name is Peter DeCosta, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
This is Pastor Rob, and you're on the Nitty Gritty Show.
I'm Ray Pittman, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
Hey, this is Joni Ford of Ford Wellness, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
Yo, what's going on? It's your boy Benny Black, and you are watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
It's time for the Nitty Gritty. Conversations get real live. It's time for the Nitty Gritty. The revolution's not televised. It's time for the Nitty Gritty. Reaching out to your conscious mind. It's time for the Nitty Gritty. More than talking, we're taking action. It's time for the Nitty Gritty.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I got Rashawn Ray with us. Happy to have you, sir. We've been trying to get this together for a while.
Yeah, we've been trying to do it. My apologies. I'm excited about it, though. I follow the show. I think it's great, and I appreciate you all having me on.
Yeah, and I should properly introduce you. You're Dr. Rashawn Ray.
You know.
Here at the University of Maryland.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an associate professor here at the University of Maryland in the Department of Sociology. Cool. I broadly study racial inequality. I think about the ways that racial inequality is created and then the ways that racial inequality is maintained in society. Where we're at now, I'm excited to kind of be in this space. It's the Lab for Applied Social Science Research. We call it LASER. I'm the executive director. We have kind of a series of programmatic efforts that we do here, and we primarily aim to link research to policymakers and the general public.
Cool. Now, I mean, what you're doing is great. You have a lot of programs you're working on, a lot of different things. We're going to touch into that. Before we get there, though, you don't hear about, let alone brothers, talking about, hey, I'm gonna grow up, I'm gonna be a sociologist. Now, it's right. The things we deal with at the black dinner table all the time, right?
Yeah.
We didn't heard our parents, our grandparents, the aunts, uncles. Everyone talks about the things you're actually working in, but then who says, you know what, I'm gonna go to school and focus on that. So at some point you made that decision. If you could kind of like share with our viewers what got Rashawn on that path.
And, you know, it's funny hearing you talk. So Neil deGrasse Tyson, of course, is a famous physicist. He always says that sociologists have the most difficult job because everyone thinks they can do it. And I really like that statement because since we live in social life, what we do as sociologists is we study the way that individuals interact in society, with social institutions, with each other, and how we think about human behavior and attitudes. Growing up, of course, as we talked previously, I'm originally from Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I grew up in Atlanta. I went to college at the University of Memphis, Kappa Eta chapter, so shout out to Juan, TSU as well. And so for me, I was pre-med going into college. My mom is a nurse, my grandmother is a nurse, my then girlfriend, who is my wife now, she was planning to go to nursing school, which she did, and she went on to get her master's. She's a nurse practitioner, has her own clinic. So I have all of this kind of medical background. I took Latin in high school. I worked at the VA hospital, in the pharmacy. I worked in the psych ward. I did all these things that were supposed to prepare me for medical school. I shadowed orthopedic surgeons. I shadowed ophthalmologists. I was trying to figure out which specialty I wanted to go into, and I thought that's what I was going to do. And then I got in college and I took a biology course, and I was like, I'm studying plants. Like, this isn't what I want to do. I was like, this just isn't how I want to live my life. Simultaneously, I was taking an intro to sociology course. And in this class, I mean, it was great. You know, I was like, wow, okay, we're learning about human behavior, why people make the decisions that they do. And it just so happened that the professor who was teaching the class was out on leave because she had cancer. She thankfully recovered, but she had one of her graduate students teaching the course. And he would come in class and do all kind of wild stuff that would just get our attention. It was a large class, about 200-300 students. Yep. I remember this one day, he came in class. He came running in class because it was like an auditorium. He came running in class, he was huffing and puffing, and he had on a shower cap and he had on a bathrobe, he had a sponge, and he had some flip-flops on. And everyone was like, what's this guy doing? And he was like, I looked up, I woke up late, I seen what time it was, I didn't even have time to take a shower, so I just ran straight here. And I was like, who is this guy? This is crazy. So at the end of class, he said, raise your hand if you remember what I talked about today. And I wasn't one of the people who raised my hand because I was so caught up in what he looked like that I really wasn't even hearing him. And he said, what I just did with you all is what's called a breach experiment. A breach experiment is where you do something different than what are the norms in the setting. As an example, you get on the elevator, someone's facing the back wall. It throws you off, right? For men, it might be being in the bathroom and there are 10 urinals and someone comes to the urinal beside you even though there aren't anyone else, there isn't anyone else in the bathroom.
Yeah, man law. You don't do that.
Yeah, you don't do that, right? So when you break these kind of norms, they're called breach experiments. And I got so fascinated with it, I was like, what can I do with sociology? I met a great mentor, Dr. Wanda Rushing, who recently retired from the University of Memphis. She was a phenomenal professor. She said, you go get your master's and PhD and you can become a professor. I was like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what you do with that. And I slowly but surely learned, and I went to graduate school at Indiana University, got my master's and PhD there. Went to UC Berkeley after that to do 2 years on my postdoc, working with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. I've spent some time at the University of Michigan. I've spent some time at the University of Mannheim in Germany. And now I've been here in Maryland for the past 8 years. So that's kind of my educational trajectory.
Wow, that's dope. I mean, and that was cool how the breach experiment kind of like first got your attention.
Oh yeah, and I have all my students do that now. Like they do all kind of wild stuff though, so I actually have to tame them down, give them things they can and cannot do. But it's all kind of stuff. Like you're sitting at a mall and you're sitting by yourself at a table, and someone comes up and moves their chair beside you and sits beside you. Like who does that? Or you go through the drive-through and you get something to eat and you pay with all pennies. Like who does these things? And what happens to us psychologically is that we attach things to labels and categories. Mm-hmm. And when the behavior doesn't fit those categories, we then don't necessarily know how to respond to what's going on. And that throws us off. And we don't like being uncomfortable like that. Instead, we're very regimented and we like things to be in a particular order.
And that in a very simple matter, when you was telling that story, the first thing I thought about was, that's what everybody's dealing with daily, or people from certain parts of the country. We've both lived in the South, so I think you know where I'm going with this. But when someone hasn't dealt with a black person directly, and you're meeting this person for the first time in a professional state, whether it's, they're going to be your insurance guy, they're selling you a car, they're selling you a house, you're closing a business deal, and you can't get past this guy is black, because maybe the only image that the media portrays of this black man is what they see in Snoop. Nothing against him, but the character that Snoop plays, I don't think that has anything to do with the man Calvin brought us. But they see this character of what they think black is, and there's been a character pushed by media in certain agendas since coming over in the 1500s of what black is. And then it's kind of like, how often does that happen daily when people don't hear anything you're saying because they can't get past the color of your skin, or maybe your shirt that's advocating for something that we need, like Black Lives Matter? Do they automatically assume you're a terrorist if certain right-wing media says that's what you are? So I think we're going to probably get more into that. I think your hat hints at that conversation.
It's so this hat actually, I have a lot of things running through my head based on what you just said. I'll touch on a few things. The hat came from Dr. Jonathan Cox, who is a professor at the University of Central Florida. He was one of my doctoral students, and when he graduated, he got me a hat. It was a great gift. I collect hats. He got it made. It's something that I try to wear, and it's interesting because evidently it's how he views me and how other people view me. So I've tried to try to embrace that role. So what you mentioned is, part of it is the scripting of how they view black bodies, whether that be black male bodies or black female bodies. They were labeled a particular way, as being dangerous, as being promiscuous, as being violent, as being overly aggressive, as being overly physical. And when you kind of put those characteristics together, it's almost animalistic in many regards. So how do you approach an animal that you have never encountered before? Casually, softly. If you see a lion running down the street, you're going to call the police. And unfortunately, that is the way some people view black bodies. And a lot of that has to do with racial segregation and the fact that we simply do not interact with each other. So even in places like the DMV, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, which is highly integrated, the most progressive area I've lived in, is still hyper-segregated. Now, when we compare it to, say, St. Louis or Baltimore or, you know, Boston or Atlanta, I mean, we see it a little bit more, but it's still here as well. And so not only is it about the labeling of black bodies, it's also about the labeling of white bodies. See, normally when we talk about race and inequality, we always talk about it from a deficit approach. In other words, we talk about kind of what's wrong with blackness. But we don't really talk about what people think is right with whiteness. And so in doing so, it becomes a bigger gap. It's not just that black is a deficit. It's also that whiteness is viewed as a premium. So when they see you and they're expecting to see a professional, not only is it that they're not expecting to see you, but they're expecting to see someone else who is actually white. So when they see a person coming to a pool in a predominantly white neighborhood, they expect to see pool goers. They just expect for that pool goer to be white. When they see kids selling lemonade, they expect to see kids selling lemonade. But they expect to see those kids being white. When they see, say, what are some of the other incidents that have happened? Playing pickup basketball. I don't know if you've seen that.
I mean, that was right here in town,
this
right?
blew my mind.
Yeah,
so you're playing
that's down the street.
And so part of that is what Irving Goffman, who was one of my favorite sociologists, he has a term called emotional volubility. And what he talked about with that is we attach not only labels to people and a certain type of physicality, but we also attach emotions to them. So when a black person makes a move, we're perceiving that it's more aggressive. When a white person makes a move, we're perceiving it as less aggressive. So part of it is the labeling. And what people don't realize is people always say, well, can stereotypes be positive? Well, kind of. They can be positive about one group. But if you're positively stereotyping one group, that means you're simultaneously negatively stereotyping another group. So if we say Asians are smart, then we're also saying that non-Asians are less smart. If we say that blacks are athletic, we're simultaneously saying that non-blacks are not as athletic. If we say that, and so I mean, we could go on and on about what that means. If we say blacks are violent and criminal, then we're simultaneously saying that non-blacks are not violent and criminal. And so part of it isn't just the labeling of blackness, it's also the labeling of whiteness, or the absence of blackness. So when I see people calling the police on black people for normal everyday things, it makes perfect sense to me from a social psychological standpoint, in the sense that those spaces weren't built for black people. People perceive that they should protect those spaces from those black people. They also perceive that the person who they were expecting to encounter should not have been black. And then this is the key point. They expect for the police to restore order with these interactions. In other words, get this person out of here. This person should not be here, and I expect for you as the police, as me as a taxpayer, to regulate that behavior.
And I mean, he's like, you just have to sit with that for a second, because when you look at this most recent election with Donald Trump, key words that he said, even though he didn't sometimes he almost blatantly said it, but that was a dog cry to that, because America has never been great for minorities, especially people of color. So when you say make America great, that part of the statement is fine. It's the again afterwards. It's like, well, wait a minute. It's never been great for everybody. So when you say make America great again, you're specifically talking to a certain group of people. And when you start saying things like us versus them, knowing who's in your audience, you're drawing a line with a certain group of people. And it's like, you have to address that.
I mean, without a doubt. I mean, the again part is the key part. Because never in human history or in American history, have things been better for African Americans in particular than it is right now. And it's not even great, but it's way better than it was 50 or 100 years ago. And so when you say again, Donald Trump and people who say that are suggesting going back to a time in which black people had fewer rights, in which women did not have certain rights to vote and do other sorts of things, in which immigration looked very different. And that's the interesting about going back. When it comes to immigration, European immigrants were coming over in droves in many regards in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And honestly, they were stereotypes as well, whether that be the Irish or the Italians, but they quickly transformed into being white in what we kind of define as white. And so part of when we think about make America great again is what it means to black people is that it suggests that you want to go back to a time when if we weren't in shackles and chains, we definitely couldn't buy this house. So we can think about redlining, we can think about restrictive covenants. These were the times in which there were certain places black people could and could not purchase property, places where black people could and could not go. We can also think about the Homestead Act, which was essentially a wholesale of getting Western land that white people could just go and find and just say, oh, nobody has this land, I'll just get this land, I'll just pick it up. So there are policies in place. The other big one I think about, though, is the New Deal, which came on the heels of World War II. And essentially what it was a policy put in place that did two things. It created the GI Bill, which you know as a veteran, you know all too well, and also established the minimum wage. Those two things single-handedly, those two policy implementations have single-handedly created the middle class we know to exist today, and really the white middle class. Why do I say that? Because we know that white veterans and black veterans were fighting side by side in World War II, but they came home to a very different situation. And when they came home, what happened was white veterans got what was due them. They could get GI Bill money to attend college on grants. They could get down payment assistance for homes. They could get money for small businesses, and they could even send their children to school. All of those were four things afforded to white veterans who fought in the war. These same affordances should have been given to black veterans, but they weren't. Black veterans did not get that money. Why? Because the GI Bill was mandated federally, but implemented locally. So in that regard, this is the whole reason why we have a plethora of historically black colleges and universities today. A lot of the HBCUs that popped up were not supposed to last this long because they were put in place to allow veterans, black veterans after World War II, to go to college. Well, we know in the 40s they couldn't go to college at the places where we are now. We know that Thurgood Marshall wasn't allowed to come to the University of Maryland where we're sitting at now.
Yep.
And so this building is named after Perrin Mitchell, who was the first black congressman in the state of Maryland and the south of the Mason-Dixon line. And he wasn't allowed to come here. And Thurgood Marshall went in the president's office, slammed down papers that the university was being sued because they would not allow Perrin Mitchell to go to school here. Perrin Mitchell was a World War II veteran, a Purple Heart recipient. He was also the little brother of Clarence Mitchell, which the admin building on this campus is named after. Clarence Mitchell was one of the chief litigators for NAACP who worked with Thurgood Marshall, who, of course, Thurgood Marshall ended up going to Howard. So we kind of have all of these connections here that when we think about what Make America Great Again means, it doesn't mean anything good for minorities and women in this country.
Yeah, and you know, it's a shame that people don't want to try to bridge the gap there. There's little sympathy, and I think that deals with the sociology that has been pushed in media. I heard D.L. Hughley say recently, because you know he has a book out right now, and you have a book out. We're going to talk about that. And it's amazing that the same cops who kill someone in a car next to their girlfriend with their baby in the back, who tells he did everything right, Philando Castile, and still got shot multiple times. But yet, those same types of cops, after someone goes on a killing spree, whether it's at a Colorado movie theater, or if it's at a school in Florida, or Houston, or anywhere that we see these mass shootings, these people are typically taken alive. And we'll see a white shooter often, and they're humanely arrested. They're given McDonald's or some food or some closure, and they are the true threat because they already have a body count lineup of 14, 9, 50-something bodies taken out, and then they can still come to them in a manner that's like polite, and then but automatically this bias, this fear towards black exists. And I guess one of the questions I would have is, what are some ideas you would have to maybe solving that psychological break in us to where we assume white is better? There's the conversation of code switching is out there because of the movie I'm Sorry to Bother You, which is great. I saw it. And then this also deficit of black for negative stereotypes that cause many of our brothers to be wrongfully imprisoned, killed, women subjugated to not getting the same care and effect when they're dealt with rape and things like that white women typically are afforded over them. So we know the issues, but is there a way to start bridging that? Is there a method that you guys have found in academics to try to help really educate people and bring that message across, or I guess find some kind of meeting line?
Yeah, I mean, great question. So Here at the Lab for Applied Social Science Research, we've been doing kind of a series of programmatic efforts with police departments and public safety officials. And we've been conducting implicit bias trainings with police departments, with Prince George's County Police Department in particular. And, you know, I think it works. I think it's effective. You know, I think that they're hesitant. Police officers are hesitant, and understandably so. You know, I think as a whole, they go out and, you know, work hard every single day, put their lives on the line for us to have the affordances to sit here today and not have to worry about certain things that they might be hearing about. You know, similarly with the military, oftentimes from an international, national defense level. At the same time, we know that there are huge disparities between the way, say, that minorities are treated in this country compared to the way whites are treated in this country. There's one stat that I always highlight that is so important, that people's cognitive dissonance, they can't even wrap their head around it, which is that blacks are 3.5 times more likely than whites to be killed by the police when they're not attacking, nor when they have a weapon. Wow. So we're talking about black people who aren't attacking. We're talking about black people who don't have a weapon. Who said they weren't attacking and who didn't, and they didn't have a weapon? Police officers. This comes from FBI, Department of Justice Bureau statistics, where police officers are asked, "You shot and killed this person. Did they have a weapon?" Nope, didn't have that. Were they attacking you? Nope, didn't have that either. I mean, what we just seen with Antoine Rose in Pittsburgh is a great example of this.
Yeah. He
was running away, didn't have a weapon, wasn't causing any type of threat. What people don't understand is that blackness becomes weaponized. Blackness is the weapon. So you don't have to have a weapon if you have black skin, because that's perceived to be the weapon. What people also don't realize is, on the same token, as I was saying earlier about labeling, whiteness also gives you certain benefits of the doubt, where when they pick up the person and you know, they might have killed several people, say like Dylan Roof at the AME church in South Carolina. They picked him up. He said he was hungry. They took him to Burger King. Why? Because when they look him in the face, they see their neighbor's kid. They see a kid that went to their church. They see a kid from their kid's school. See, that's what segregation does. When oftentimes police officers go to black neighborhoods, in particular poor black neighborhoods, they don't live in those neighborhoods. Nope. They don't interact with people in those neighborhoods. Most of them don't come from those neighborhoods. And because of that, they, even if they don't realize it, they have a particular view of people who live there because they're detached. And so when you all of a sudden think that somebody could be, I always, the police chief at PGPD has a good analogy for this that I like to use in a lot of ways. He says, if you see a vehicle and it has the bumper sticker of a school that you went to, what do you instantly think? So you ride down the street, you see a Tennessee State University bumper sticker. What do you think? What is that going on?
You would say go Tigers automatically, though.
Yeah, you automatically start to kind of think.
Or I see Austin P. Doves or whatever like that. Yeah. You know, hey, go Govs. You know what I mean?
So you instantly think you have a connection with them. And that's what we do with people. So when you feel like you have a connection, you treat them accordingly. You give them the benefit of the doubt. The other thing that's key is, because you're asking what can we do about it? I think the bias training matters, but I also think we need hardcore policy change. What we need is a restructuring of our criminal justice system. When it comes to policing in particular, there are a few things we could do. First thing we could do is, I think we've done a couple things. I think body cams are important. I think we need mental health training for police officers. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that they work a lot of hours, they see a lot of traumatic stuff, and they rarely get fully treated for it. So I think we need outside entities to come in and actually provide some care there.
I like that.
I think the other thing we need is potentially a public reporting of internal sanctions. So what happens in police departments, they get internally sanctioned a lot, actually. We just never know about it, never hear about it. Could be argued maybe we don't need to, but considering that taxpayer money is paying their salaries, it could mean that maybe we should. And then maybe all of a sudden that's opened up to teachers, that's opened up to medical personnel if they're at a public, a tax-paying hospital. The point is that that's something that would do something. Now all of a sudden that holds them accountable. I think the big thing that could happen is, what all of a sudden if the payouts for police killings came from police pensions rather than from taxpayer money? Because this kind of thing people don't know. You know the incident in McKinley, Texas, where the girl was body slammed outside by the cop outside of the pool? She got like $150,000. The brother that was at University of Virginia who got thrown on the ground outside of a club and his face got all scraped up, he got $250,000. That money came from local taxpayers.
Yep.
So when we think about Freddie Gray getting nearly $6 million, when we think about Kareem Gaines' family getting about $32 million, that money comes from taxpayers. What if the money shifted? Now all of a sudden police officers are starting to hold each other accountable for the decisions that are made.
Yeah.
And I think these are some policy changes, because when you look back through history, it wasn't like white people wanted to desegregate schools. It wasn't like that. Instead, schools got desegregated policy-wise, and attitudes started to shift. I think we have to treat this the same way. We can't necessarily just expect that empathy is going to solve everything. I think empathy is important, but at the same time, we need the policy change.
I agree with that, and I think I'm happy that you touched on those, because for one, policy goes directly to voting. Exactly. And we were talking about this even before we started taping, that too often we don't participate in the full scale of what it means to be able to vote. It's not about voting in a general election for president. We have local elections. We have primaries. As we had stated earlier, Maryland, D.C., Virginia are all closed primary states. So if you're not a registered Republican or a registered Democrat, you don't even get a chance to see who's going to go into the general election that some people participate in. And the issue with that is a lot of those really great, even on the Republican side, you have some moderate Republicans out there. You have some moderate liberals out there that kind of can meet halfway and really work together. Yeah. But those people get ignored because they don't get the votes they need in the primary. And because we don't participate there, we wait to the general. But by the time the general comes around, the folks that participate are your hardcore Republicans, your hardcore Democrats. And they'll normally strain either far right or far left. So then come time for the general, it's more of the same. Yeah. So we have to get involved with that. And I like the fact that you brought up pulling the money that we get as a recourse to bad action of police from something that benefits them instead of our money. Because a lot of people don't know, and I'm happy you brought that up, that money is typically money that was set aside to build the basketball courts we talk about, the better daycares, but then it gets pulled from that budget to handle the death of someone who, as you said before, wasn't either armed or wasn't attacking. So, yeah, I think once you put it on them, that changes. The blue line may still exist, but that blue line changes because it's like, hey, now the good cops are like, the 90% of them, I give them the benefit of the doubt. The 90% of them that are good cops, they're like, hey, hold up. Y'all 10% need to check it because y'all messing up our money for no reason. Exactly. And I like that. I like that approach. I think that really changes things.
Yeah, I mean, because people don't realize that your silence is your acceptance. You know that you're in the military, right? So my grandfather served 21 years. He was a drill sergeant. So he would always say your silence is your acceptance. That's true. And that's part of what we see there. And so now all of a sudden they start to hold each other accountable. On the other front, as it relates to people calling the police on black people for doing everyday things, eating at Starbucks or whatever, we should do the same thing we do, like when our house alarm goes off falsely. So, you know, when you have a house alarm in your home and it goes off multiple times in say a 6-month period or a 12-month period, you actually get fined by the local jurisdiction for having the police come out for no reason. We should do the same thing when people call the police on black people for no reason or call the police on Latino people for no reason, right? Because part of what we don't realize, you're wasting resources. So like at the gym, the guy was like, the police officer was like, man, what you call me for this for? Like, this is a waste of my time. And it is. There are other things that our police officers should be focused on instead of things like that. But we need a mechanism to hold people accountable. Now all of a sudden, if someone knows if I make a false claim and nothing happens, that I'm going to get fined $50 or $100, they'll think twice before they actually engage in that type of behavior. You know, I think the other thing with the voting process, you know, Trump's election, well, Philando Castile's killing did something to me. I mean, all of them have, Tamir Rice in particular, but Philando Castile, it was because Diamond Reynolds' daughter was in the car with her after it happened. And when Diamond Reynolds, who's Philando's girlfriend, was screaming out to God to keep Philando alive, the little girl who was about 4 years old said, "Mommy, don't cry, I'm here." And I was sitting up thinking, I have a, 6 and 7-year-old, a couple years ago, I mean, they were 4 and 5. And I could not go back to their school and look at them and their friends in the eye, knowing I wasn't doing everything I could do to try to keep them and all kids safe. So that was at that point in time, I had a conversation with my wife, and I was like, look, we're not doing enough, and we need to start playing a more active role in the political process. So this year, we put on a series of political events, mostly at our home, And all of the candidates that we supported and had these events for got elected. I'm sure it won't be like that forever, but it was a good first run. And the way I want people to really think about this, Frank Scott, who is I'm one of his pro fights, so he's Kappa Eta Strong from Memphis. He's running for mayor of Little Rock. He's a phenomenal politician and just a really good person. And I'm pretty sure he's going to get elected. I have no doubt about it. He's primed for Little Rock. But when he was here and he was speaking at my house, he said, what people don't realize is we're creating the farm team. He said, if you want to know what happened with Trump, he said, yeah, everybody focuses on Trump. He said, but what people don't realize, if it wasn't Trump, it would have been someone else. He said, and that's because when Obama got elected, the Republicans built a farm team. That farm team is now running Washington. Mm-hmm. What we have to do now, progressives, liberals, I don't even necessarily like to attach the Democrat, Republican labels on the things. I think that our two-party system is overly simplistic. And if we actually broke that down, we would have a lot more parity across the board and a lot more progress. But given that, we're building the farm team and supporting local candidates. The people you're supporting now for state delegate, state senator, mayor, city council, 8, 10, 12, 16, 20 years from now, they're going to be running for Congress. They're going to be running for senator. They're going to be running for governor. And some will even be running for president. So our investment now is really an investment in our kids' future. 20 years from now, my kids will be almost 30. What have I done today that has set them up 20 years from now that when they have kids, that their kids won't be trying to have these same type of conversations that we're having now. Mm-hmm. And it's not only about the research that I do and the work that we're trying to do at the University of Maryland, but it's also the investment that we're making locally. And I think politics is a key place to do that.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, definitely. I can't no more agree with you because it's really important. Shout out to Will Jawando, who ran for a local office.
Will Jawando, he was one of the people who, of course, that's how we met.
Yep.
And we had an event at our house for Will. And, I think Will Jawando is phenomenal. I think his wife is phenomenal. I mean, they are the type of people who America really needs to see and really that the world needs to see. When I'm around them, their energy, and I'm not even a big energy person either. But when I'm around them, I'm like, their energy suggests that they are invested in trying to make people feel good, trying to make people prosper, trying to help everybody win. And when people are invested in having everybody win, I'm all for it. I think Jazz Lewis is another person who's in Prince George's County. Corey McRae, who's up in Baltimore, is another person. John Bullock, who's up in Baltimore, is another person. I mean, there are kind of a list of people, who I think that are really going to Eric Barron is another person in Prince George's County. I think these people are really going to transform politics and business as usual, and I think they're going to be really good for the future.
Yeah, there's definitely a future uprising, and I think that's why I appreciate, not to exhaust the topic, but that's why I appreciate what you're doing with the police. And what I would like to see in the future is to see that expand. I know you have hopes and works on expanding it past the police department, but I would like to see that happen with our judges.
Oh, yeah.
I would like to see that happen with our teachers.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think it's enough of it being done. Mm-hmm. And we have to nearly change the scope of what is America, because what America currently is not good enough for where we're supposed to go.
And on that point, one of the things we've done, so we do the trainings, but what we've really done is we've created a virtual reality simulation program. What this program is able to do is to put, say, police officers into a virtual world where they're pulling someone over or they get a call about a suspicious person. And they can actually practice interactions before they go out into the field. And what this program can do is measure their attitudes, can evaluate their behavior, can also look at their physiological responses, their heart rate, their stress level, their reaction time, their eye movement. And we can tell them, whether or not, if they encountered one person versus another person, did it elicit a difference? And I think more importantly, what it can show is, and I'll make 2 points on this. First is that the program can show officers who really don't have any bias. These are the officers who we need to have, be showcased, but also to be teaching other officers how to reduce some of the differences in what they're doing. So really what we're able to get at is decision making in a way that really hasn't been done before. And then all of a sudden this information can be packaged and we can say, these are the types of officers who are good at decision making, who are doing things in line with training. Does that mean you don't hire certain people? Not necessarily, like maybe, but not necessarily. It could just mean maybe they need additional training. Because this is the other part of it. Most of the officers who are quote unquote behaving badly have a track record. So the police officer in Pittsburgh, he had worked at the University of Pittsburgh before that. He got let go. See, what happens is they just cast people aside. It's kind of the same way we would do rapists and sexual assaulters. We just say, oh, let's just keep them quiet. Let's just move them to the side. That's the reason why at the ESPYs you had over 100 gymnasts on the stage. These are the best gymnasts in the world. And here they are standing on stage because adults were not brave enough to speak up when a physician was molesting them on a doctor's table. We're talking about hundreds of girls and young women. I mean, so that's where the silence becomes acceptance comes in. If we have, and it's not even about being a whistleblower, it's about just doing the right thing. Like the whistleblower term, I'm like, that's not what we're talking about. Like if somebody hits you in the head, oh, so you blowing the whistle because you tell somebody because they hit you in the head? No, you're simply doing your moral obligation, particularly when you see something to speak up and speak out. And if we have more people do that, that cop wouldn't even been able to shoot Antoine Rose. The same way with Tamir Rice. One of the cops who shot Tamir Rice had been let go from another department
right there in Ohio.
And see, what people don't realize is at times the fraternal order police will tell them, you should resign. You can always get your job back, but if you get fired, you can't come back. So they tell them to resign. That gives them the ability to now go get another job. And we already know that it's so difficult to convict a police officer. Why? Because you have to say, are they behaving reasonably like other police officers? And if the answer is no, then they get reprimanded. But typically, they're not going to really go to jail for those sort of things. They're going to get internally reprimanded. They're going to get demoted. They're going to get docked in their pay. They're going to be put on desk duty. Things that shouldn't be taken lightly. Like, these are serious things. But imagine if we got information about that, if they were publicly reported, that we actually know this information. Now, all of a sudden, when you get ready to do something, I might check you. Because I'm like, you're messing up my pension, and you're going to make our department look bad. Right now, those sort of accountabilities aren't happening. And the fact that we're paying our tax money for this should be completely out of the question. Yeah,
I like that. I would like to see you, I would like to talk further about that. And we're going to have you on the show just for that conversation alone.
Yeah, exactly.
And just to really do a deep dive into your work, maybe just follow you because I'm really interested in that. You're a busy brother. So, not just being the head of this department, but then you also just recently put out a book.
Yeah, so it's been a long time. So because you all were talking about it earlier, but how families matter, the simply complicated intersections of race, gender, and work with Pamela Brayboy Jackson, who was actually one of my dissertation advisors at Indiana University. And this has been a long labor of love. It's a great book. Essentially what we did was we interviewed 46 black, white, and Mexican American families. And we wanted to know how they were doing family. We think that family gets a very bad rap today. As being dysfunctional, as being chaotic, as being unnecessary. And for us, we found something quite different. We found that, yes, family was all of those things except for the unnecessary part. In fact, family is very necessary. And it's kind of an oxymoron. As chaotic as family becomes, the more important it becomes. And so we were really looking at the ways that people do family in everyday life. What does that look like when people are trying to juggle family and work? What does it look like when somebody gets sick? What does it look like when family members haven't spoken in years and somebody dies or a baby's born or somebody gets married? How do families maintain connections from afar? So we really wanted to look at this across racial groups. We wanted to look at it across family types. We wanted to look at it across social class categories. And I mean, as a whole, what we found was that people really enjoy being around their family members. That people, there are issues and problems, but at the end of the day, people really, really appreciate, love, and respect the people in their family. And, I think for anybody who's interested in kind of reflecting on their own family life, which is what this book made Pam and myself do, I think this is the kind of book for them. We kind of talk about in the book a form of family resiliency, which is that no matter what, families tend to respond over time. Families go through ebbs and flows, but at the end of the day, they're still kind of family and they come back together. And even if you might not talk to a relative for a few years, you come back together and you end up doing those sort of things. And For blacks and Latinos, for example, they were more likely to report a family member, a sibling in particular, as a best friend. We're talking about people are very, very close in terms of family formation, in terms of how they're thinking about family. But family is very complicated. And the complications are that when there are multiple siblings and parents get sick, you have to make decisions about what you're going to do. Those are difficult decisions. When someone moves away and you're trying to maintain contact with them, that's difficult to do. When someone gets divorced or when someone passes away. These are key junctures that become kind of difficult for people to navigate. The other thing we found, we highlight this typology where oftentimes working class and poor people are playing checkers. We think about board games, they're playing checkers. They having to make one move at a time, and they're normally reacting to the other player. Middle class people are able to play chess. They have multiple pieces on the board, and they have a queen that can typically do anything and move all around the board and make big jumps. So this could be someone gets sick, and we got the money to spend $2,000 to fly home and see our family. Or we got the job flexibility when a kid gets sick at school that you can go pick them up on the spot. Mm-hmm. Working class and poor parents don't have that flexibility.
Yeah. Factories don't give you that kind of time.
Factories don't give you that time. Professional occupations, you get paid whether or not you in the office or not oftentimes, as long as you get your work done.
Yep.
These are differences that are quite different from middle class and working class people, and it cuts across families in ways that can at times create conflict, but also create opportunities where family members can share social and cultural capital with one another.
When you bring that up, it makes me think about, I just had this conversation actually with a coworker, and we were talking about how, we met with actually some psychologists on the show, and we talked about families, like people's backgrounds, and what that does. Yeah, and what that does to pour into like a marriage and everything. But we don't think about the sociological aspects of that, about not just what that does for internal in the house, who you're going to marry, how you're going to react with your wife, but then also just having a strong family background, what kind of employee that makes you. There's a book that I read called Systems. You may be familiar with this. And it talks about how people who come from a good system just tend to do well. Yep. And oftentimes the coach, the teacher, the employer wants to take credit for somebody's good work. But normally what happens is that person comes from a system that allows them to be successful. They had some good home training. They had support of a mom and dad. It makes a difference. There's the support of a involved father, which I always like to say that black men, 69% of black men are highly involved with their kids, but the media doesn't portray that in TV, television, news, whatever. It's always that we're not there, but we're actually more involved than everyone else. And just how we govern ourselves based off that family structure, just going out into the rest of the world, how we're going to take tests, how we deal with girls when we meet them, or young men, depending on, where you are, or how you just work, or how hard you try at the football games, or in life, or what you aspire to do. Family has a lot to do with that. There is really no mistakes. When you look at those people who are doing really well, they got families. And does the book kind of go over that for people? Because I don't think people realize, how much that matters.
Well, part of one of the things you hit the nail on the head about, systems matter, like organizational structures matter, mentors matter. And oftentimes within people's families, or where they sometimes find the first set of mentors. They might call them granddad or grandma or cousin so-and-so or auntie so-and-so, but they are some of the first mentors and emulators that people are actually able to replicate. One of the things we highlight in the book is 46 families, but these aren't nuclear families. These are families that have fictive kin and extended kin. So in one family, we might have 13 people, 13 respondents, who are cousins, who are aunties, who are nieces, nephews, who are grandparents, who's a godfather. And when you put that together, you start to see the system that you're talking about, kind of a body of people. And that's what hasn't been highlighted in sociological research in particular, is the role of extended kin. And I know personally, growing up in a single-parent household, never seeing my father before, that extended family was vital. My grandfather was like my father. My godfather was like my father. My big brother and big brothers and big sisters growing up in Atlanta and Stone Mountain was like my father. My uncle was like my father. And so my mom was able to build this system around me of men for me to kind of replicate and emulate and want to be like. And, that system has turned out well. And I still keep in touch with them, obviously, to this day, in terms of getting advice from them and really trying to make them proud. And that's one of the things that the book highlights is this extended kin. It's not always a parent in the household. Oftentimes it is, but sometimes it's not. And you're right. Research definitely shows that black fathers, relative to white fathers and fathers of other racial and ethnic backgrounds, are actually more involved in doing the daily activities with their children. Picking kids up from school, fixing food, doing homework, doing play dates, giving them baths, all the sort of things that we know that it takes to be a parent. Is that doesn't mean that the media is highlighting it, but as we always know, I mean, the revolution will not be televised. So the real change and progress is happening, which I think people's first ministry should be in their own household with their own family, that gets overlooked oftentimes. And our book highlights that. The role also that religion plays in the process. The role that activities play in this, certain rituals. Having, when people have cookouts, they're just not having a cookout to eat food. They're having a cookout. I mean, the food helps, of course, but they're having a cookout to fellowship with family members and friends. And that's really what it's about. It's about moments. That's the other thing we find. Moments matter. People remember moments, positively and negatively. Moments matter. And people can reflect on things that have happened in the house that they feel like has shaped them. And, now as a parent, you just hope, I just hope that I'm creating way more positive moments for my kids to remember than anything negative that will carry with them, and this kind of system can help them grow.
Cool. Well, I feel like we covered a lot of great stuff. There's also, before we cut off, I know you also have another publication you work with here.
Yeah, I can talk about that. So I'm one of the co-editors of Context magazine. And Context is viewed as the public face, the public voice of sociology, of the American Sociological Association. So myself, along with Fabio Rojas, he's a professor at Indiana University, we co-edit the magazine. And really what it is, it's a way for sociology to be accessible to the general public. We publish articles that are no longer than 3,000 words. Most of them are about 1,000 or 500 words, and they're supposed to be shorter articles than the 9,000 or 10,000 word articles that we publish for academic journals, to be accessible to the public and policymakers. We have a feature section. So our upcoming issue is focused around resistance, and we talk about Take a Knee. So there are a set of authors, scholars who do an analysis of how many players were taking a knee and why were they taking a knee when they reacted to something. Oftentimes it was Trump's comments that they were kind of reacting to. We can also look at abortion. We can think about vaccines, or kind of the anti-vaccine movement, that children get over 20 vaccines before they grow up. That's a crap load of vaccines, but at the same time, they're not getting chickens and chicken pox and measles and mumps and rubella anymore. But parents are still kind of thinking about the implications of that. So we have this platform that allows for scholars, as well as the public, policymakers, corporate officials, to write pieces in this magazine. And we have a large distribution list that goes to policymakers around the country, as well as to nonprofits and academics.
That's dope. Well, Rashawn, we definitely appreciate your time here. And, thanks for coming on the Nitty Gritty Show.
Man, thank you for having me. This was great. Yeah, so I'm on social media at Sociologist Ray, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. Everything is at Sociologist Ray. You can also go to my website. It's just www.rashawnray.com. That's RASHAWNRAY.com. It has articles. It has different types of publications, different types of appearances. But on social media, I'm pretty active. Follow me. I'll follow you back. On Instagram, I post a lot of things about quotes. I post kind of short videos, things that people need to know. On Twitter, I post a lot of things about research, and Facebook kind of houses it all.
And where can people find Context Magazine?
People can find Context Magazine at context.org. Again, Context is the public face of the American Sociological Association. It's an academic magazine that allows sociologists to reach with the public better. Context is also on Twitter as well as on Facebook. But you go to context.org, tons of free content. In fact, every issue we come out with is free for 30 days. You can download basically the entire magazine. And then, of course, you can subscribe. It's a quarterly magazine, so essentially like paying a monthly rate, but you would just get one every quarter, and you'll get about 80 pages of, just great reading, great insights about kind of how to live your life and the way that people are interacting in the world.
And then last but not least, you got a book out?
Yeah, got a new book out, How Families Matter, the Simply Complicated Intersections of Race, Gender, and Work in America, published with Pamela Brayboy Jackson. You can go to Roman and Littlefield, but you can also order it from Amazon. And even feel free to hit me up directly for special discounts.
Hi, I'm Leah.
And I'm Corey.
And you're watching The Nitty Gritty Show.
My name is Lawrence Sanders, and I'm here on the Nitty Gritty Show.
I'm Sandra.
And I'm Jerome. And we are the Scotts. And you're watching The Nitty Gritty Show.
I'm Dr. Robert J. Patterson, and you're now watching The Nitty Gritty Show.
My name is Chantal Russell, and you're watching The Nitty Gritty Show.
I'm Pastor Kelly Fox, and you're now watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Smith, and you're watching The Nitty Gritty Show.